Today, what I'm going to do is try to talk about 10 things we have learned about this invasive species of stink bug through our research over the last couple of years. But before I get into those 10 things, and first of all, let me just say I know that I'm dealing with a very well-educated audience, so I know that you guys already know a lot of these things, but we'll just have a little review just to remind ourselves of how pesky these stink bugs actually are. I know you do. I know you do. So we know that this stink bug is not native to the United States. It's native to China, Japan, Korea, and Taiwan. Now, a little bit about the life history of this bug. In this region, we have obviously large populations of brown marmorated stink bugs, and there are two key reasons why this insect has become so problematic. The first is that it has a very broad host range. It's been recorded to feed on over 100 different host plants, and of course that includes many important crops in our gardens, including tree fruit, small fruit, grapes, vegetables, legumes, and ornamentals. And the other thing is, because this species is invasive, it's not from North America, many of the natural enemies that we have here do not recognize this insect as food. At least they didn't initially. And so this allowed populations to proliferate. You can see the different life stages. And just as a reminder, this is the first specimen, and just keep this in mind, this is the first specimen I ever found, and the first specimen found in the state of Maryland. It was found in Hagerstown at the local snack store just off Route 70 back in 2003. And that was the first confirmed specimen outside Allentown, Pennsylvania, where it was first detected. A little bit about the history of this bug. As I mentioned, this was the first specimen collected in Maryland. That was 2003. However, the first properly identified specimen came in 2001, and that was from Allentown, Pennsylvania. After that, over the course of the years, we found it in West Virginia in 2004. It was found in Virginia in 2005. And then for a period of years, we really didn't see any major problems, but things began to change in this area in about 2006, 2007, where I'm sure many homeowners like you started to see bugs showing up in their houses. By 2008, the agricultural problems had begun, where we had growers reporting late season problems in tree fruit, and it continued until 2010, where certainly that was the biggest outbreak year that we had, where we had serious agricultural injury across the mid-Atlantic. That's Maryland, West Virginia, Virginia, Delaware, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, and we had significant nuisance problems for homeowners and businesses. 2011, we had some problems early season, but then we saw a very strange crash late in the season, and we can talk about that later, why or that may have happened. In 2012, last spring, at this time of the year, we were starting out with very few bugs. But over the course of one season last year, those populations recovered, and I know many of you probably had seen more bugs coming into your home late last fall. The bugs have overwintered. They're leaving their overwintering sites now, and so the question is, how will they do this season? This is the question that we've been talking a lot. You think fabulous? So let's hope not. They have moved in, and here's where they've moved in across the United States and North America. They have now been detected officially in 40 states across the country, including Hawaii. They are also in Ontario, Canada. And you can see that these states have been highlighted based on the severity of the problem. We are in the red zone, as you see there. But we are in the center of the red zone. We are right at the bullseye of the red zone. But you can see the states surrounding that. This is the first time that Ohio, New York, North Carolina, and Tennessee reported agricultural problems for the first time last year. We also have all of those states highlighted in yellow, like Kentucky, Indiana, Michigan, the province of Ontario, some of the states in New England reporting nuisance problems for the first time. So this bug is continuing to spread, and we're starting to see more problems in more places. So now, with that little introduction, let me talk about the 10 things we've learned about stink bugs. And like I said, I know that I'm dealing with a well-educated audience, but for review, the first thing that we've learned about brown marmorated stink bug, it is a serious agricultural pest. It has been called the most serious agricultural pest to come on to the United States agricultural scene in a generation. And so we know that this pest has a broad host range. We know that it attacks tree fruits and nuts, and we've seen the damage and devastation in this region with our local growers. We also know that it feeds on vegetables, everything from tomatoes, corn, such as sweet corn, peppers, eggplant, okra, any kind of bean you can think of, this bug will feed on it. This bug feeds on small fruit like blueberries and raspberries as well as grapes, and this is continuing to be an issue. In Oregon, in the Willamette Valley, where they produce a lot of the Manny-fine Pinot Noirs for sale for U.S. wines, this bug is becoming more and more serious. So we're seeing issues across the country. It attacks row crops, soybeans and field corn. If any of you live next to a soybean or field corn kind of planting, you may know that, because in the late season, when these hosts no longer are acceptable, this is when we see them moving into other crops, including our backyard gardens, and in the fall into our houses. So soybeans and corn are very good hosts for this bug. Now, this bug isn't content to just feed on fruits and vegetables and things like that. This bug will feed directly through the bark of trees. It will put its proboscis directly through the bark and feed on the sap, deriving nutrition. And we've seen them on a wide range of woody ornamentals. In this case, this is a Norway maple, and on newly planted peach trees in some of our orchards. This is a peach tree from a grower over in Lisbon, Maryland. So that's number one. What's number two? Here's one we're all familiar with. It is a serious nuisance pest. This is the picture from 2010 where this was on the New York Times, where they were literally sweeping up bugs in a 5-gallon bucket. This was taken in Burkittsville, Maryland. Now look at this. This is very interesting. One of the things that we did was just to plot on the map where we see these serious problems from both agricultural and nuisance pest problems, as well as places where we see those large aggregations around lights in the summertime. If you look at these points, here we are in Boonesboro. If you look at these points on the map, you can see the ridge lines. And what we're starting to see is a pattern where we see large populations that are damaging to agriculture, as well as serious nuisance problems, where there is a lot of woodlots available, and we see ridges. We see a bit of topography or geography. So it seems like there's something interesting about this landscape that is really, unfortunately, very good for these stink bugs. So I have a question for you. Anybody know where this farm is located? Where does that look like? Anybody know? Any guesses? Does it look local?
I actually bought
looks like Japan. Yeah. You're close. This is South Korea. This is South Korea. This is a place where these bugs are found. We traveled through this area, and the thing that struck me when we were traveling through, learning about brown marmorated stink bug in that region, was how similar the geography and the plant life seemed to be, and it made a lot of sense why these bugs are doing very well. They have a lot of these sort of ridge lines, a lot of woodlots, and then down in the valleys, there is the agriculture. And so it seems like this area was unfortunately ready-made for these bugs. So I know that's not good news, right? Don't worry, I have good news. I'll tell you good news later. So when I was traveling through this part of South Korea, guess where the first place I found stink bugs for real was? A gas station. Yeah. Yeah. So here we are at a gas station. We found them around the lights, and there was a nice Paulownia tree, the empress tree there growing, and all over that tree were brown marmorated stink bugs. So those were my first finds in South I don't know who that was. No, I actually do. That is Doug Inkley, who counted and removed 26,000 stink bugs from his home back in 2011 and published a paper on that project. So he, like all of us, knows that stink bugs are a big deal. Okay, let's move on to number 3. Now, we know they overwinter in our homes. This is obvious. But one of the things that we learned recently is that they also overwinter in the natural landscape. And there's a reason why this is important, because for our growers, we see at this time of the year large numbers of bugs coming out of those woodlots and coming into the orchards. We didn't think they were coming from houses because there were no houses nearby. So we went out and looked for these bugs, trying to understand how many could be out there just overwintering out in the woods. And what we found was, by basically checking every structure that we could, dead standing trees, leaf litter, rocks, and things like that, we started to zero in on these dead standing trees. And when we started sampling these in large numbers, what we found is under the bark of dead standing trees where it's dry, you find aggregations of bugs out there. Hibernating, exactly. This is exactly what they're doing. And if you get a very dry, porous, dead standing tree, they can line that tree. We have reports, and if you guys ever find one of these, let me know. We have reports of people cutting down a tree for firewood, and literally if it's hollow in the center, it can be filled with bugs. And we want to find one of these mega trees and take photos of it. We've found upwards of 100 bugs per tree, but we would like to find...
You don't want to suck them up and kill them?
Well, we want to know how many are out there, because if we don't know how many are out there, we can't get well, there are gazillions, but we got to figure out what the risk is of different landscapes. Yeah, we do need the wasp. Okay, here's another part of this story. We are not particularly efficient samplers, and so in working with the USDA's APHIS Detector Dog, National Detector Dog Training Center, we actually trained some dogs to go out with us in the natural landscape, and they can literally find these trees and sniff out the stink bugs. And so this allows us to sample more efficiently. It was a really good project, and we're hoping that this will tell us, be able to tell us what the density of bugs in these natural landscapes are. So that's number 3. And here is this is actually Opal. These are all rescue dogs that are rehabbed and retrained and taught to do these kinds of projects. And so Opal found us some stink bugs out on the Appalachian Trail. Now here's another thing that's very interesting about this bug. We know that we can transport these all over the country in our cars, in our suitcases when we move. But what we've also learned is that they can disperse over large distances. And the way we learned this was to basically look at their flight capacity using what we call a flight mill, where it's a device, you tether the insect, it allows them to fly, and you can measure the distance that they moved. And this is these flight mills in action, so you can get a sense of what we do. It's kind of like the gym for stink bugs. And they are flying under their own power. This is not sped up. So every time they make a loop, that we are able to capture that distance. So how far do you think these bugs could fly in a day, one day? To China, yeah, let's send it back. Let's send it back. They can fly on average 1 to 2 miles per day, but we also have super flyers that within a day can fly over 20 miles. So that means that not only can they get around just by us moving them, but they can fly 20 miles to a new location too, unfortunately. But this is good because we need to understand their biology, and so we definitely are. Now, this isn't really good news, but I want you guys to be aware of it. Residual activity of insecticides against this bug is short. So in other words, you go out or you have someone come out and treat your home, they apply an insecticide, here's the before and after. So the after is probably about a day later. And the reason we know this is when we've looked at the residual activity, when you expose them to insecticide residue, here they are exposed to fresh residue. This is their mortality over 5 days. At day 5, we're about 75% mortality for adults exposed to a pyrethroid, a class of insecticide. 3 days later, if you expose them to that residue that's just 3 days old, you're down to 40%. So it doesn't last very long. And this is with overwintered adults, the old adults that emerge in the spring. They're fairly weak. Here are the adults that you contend with in the fall. Look at the difference. The adults are much harder to kill in the fall when they're going into overwintering, when they're going into your homes. That's the other thing to keep in mind. So insecticides have only limited use against this bug, unfortunately. But let's talk about good news now. It's not all bad. One of the things that we're learning, this is number 6, our native natural enemies are beginning to recognize and attack this stink bug. Hooray for our natural enemies. Yes, let me talk about some of them. Okay, this is a species of sand wasp. Now, in this case, the sand wasp does require sandy soil, but what these wasps do is they provision nests for their young. And in places where these sand wasps are present, you can find in some cases 50% of the insects that are provisioned in that nest are brown marmorated stink bugs. So we like these sand wasps. And they can take upwards of 20 bugs down into these nests. And this was some work done by our colleagues at Penn State. So this is really good news. We're happy about the sand wasp, but that's a predator. There are a lot of other predators that are feeding on the eggs and the nymphs and the adults. We have this guy, a minute pirate bug. You see that mouth part? That is basically a proboscis. They stab the nymph or the egg and suck the life out of it. The same with that big-eyed bug over there. The same kind of thing. They stab it and suck the life out of it. And these guys like stink bugs. So these are natives. So it's something that you can encourage around your home with different. Have you guys seen these wheel bugs? Yeah, they love stink bugs. They will do same kind of thing. They're piercing, sucking predators. They stab them and suck the life out of them. Spiders, another good one. We see some of our spiders. Praying mantids. Look at this bug. What a fool. Sitting on the back of a praying mantis. He didn't last. The end of the story was he was dead. Now we have other predators. You see this, the bluebird? See what's in its mouth? This was sent to us by a photographer near Columbia, Maryland. Every other meal this bluebird was taking back to its juveniles was a brown marmorated stink bug. Yay! So they are starting to recognize, hey, this is a good food source. So this is all really good news.
So that's all they eat, bud. They don't harm your plants.
No, these are all carnivores. So they are not going to harm your plant.
I don't like wasps, but I don't mind this.
Yeah.
And I've been seeing them in my yard. So
Yeah, no,
keep them.
keep the assassin bugs. They are doing good work. Keep the assassin bugs. Now, parasitoids are those little wasps that lay eggs in the eggs of brown marmorated stink bug. And they do a good job, but what we're finding is it depends on the plant species because they also have a preference on where they want to forage. So something like sweet corn, you might find about 28% of the eggs parasitized. On red maple, 19%. Eggplant, 23%. Unfortunately, some of our trees, like Tree of Heaven, it's down around 4%. But all of this is good because every egg that's parasitized, that means one less brown marmorated stink bug, and we will take it, right? So this is all good news. So we have good news too. Now, number 7. This is good too. The pheromone of brown marmorated stink bug has been identified. We do know what the pheromone is now, and we can start to think about how to use it. This began last year, or actually in 2011, with a finding that we had at my lab. Here is the response to brown marmorated stink bug to a trap baited with this pheromone. We were getting upwards of 700 bugs per trap using that lure at that time of the year. However, one of the things we didn't know was, would it be attractive to the bugs season long? So at this time last year, we were going to the field and testing this pheromone. And what we found was, even in the early season, when these bugs first leave their overwintering sites like your homes, we're capturing them in traps. So this was really good. And this led to a national trial that my colleagues and I did across the country from West Virginia and Maryland the whole way to Oregon and Washington State, asking if this pheromone was attractive to bugs season long, because our growers need this to be able to detect the presence, abundance, and seasonal activity of this bug. So we put this out in traps across the country. This is the trap design that we've been using. You'll see them around in some of the commercial orchards and other areas, or other crops in this area. We baited them, and season long, the purple line represents the pheromone. We saw that the bug was being detected and attracted to this pheromone. The other piece of this story was that when we actually started to look at the dose of the pheromone, the amount of pheromone you would put in the traps, the more you put in, the more bugs you capture. And what this means is that we can start thinking about attract and kill for this bug, that we could actually attract them to a particular location and then annihilate them. And so this is what we're thinking about for the future with this brown marmorated stink bug, at least in commercial agriculture, because we don't want to have to treat crops repeatedly with insecticides if we can attract them to a particular location and just knock them down right there. So this is all really good news that we have been finding. And this is 2013. These are all the states where these pheromone trials are going on across the country. We've been shipping lures. So we're going to be doing season-long monitoring of this bug in all of those states. We're going to be testing trap designs for this bug. There are a lot of ideas about what works best. As I mentioned, we're looking at developing a attract and kill for this bug and new detections, because people need to know when this bug is showing up, and this pheromone is going to allow them to do that. So that's good news too. So we're getting a better handle on this bug. Another thing we learned last year, actually the last couple of years, is that we can monitor brown marmorated stink bug activity with simple light traps. Basically baiting a trap with a light bulb. And in a study that we did in 2011, over just 6 weeks, with just 21 traps, we captured over 13,000 stink bugs. And most of them were in traps baited with white compact fluorescent bulbs, blue, or black light, UV. And so this led to our studies last season, where we looked at these 3 stimuli, the black, blue, and white light bulbs, asking if we could attract them season long with these light bulbs, and how specific were they? In other words, were we capturing a lot of non-targets, like things we didn't want to catch, like our ground beetles or our honeybees or moths? And so we put this out in our commercial orchards across Maryland and West Virginia. This is what one of these traps look like. This is actually at Catoctin Mountain Orchard in Thurmont, and you can view these from Route 15 if you were going up Route 15. It looked like an airstrip at the top of the ridge line. But these worked very well over the course of the season. And what we found was, in fact, a compact this is good to know, because this is what you don't want to put on your front porch. A white compact fluorescent bulb was the most attractive to these bugs season long, followed by blue and then black, but black we couldn't see it either. But the other piece that was important to this was how many non-targets were we getting. Unfortunately, with the white light, we were also getting too many non-targets. Black, you get a lot of moths. Blue was actually the most specific. So depending on what we want to do with it, blue or white light will probably be the stimuli, the visual stimuli that we use. But it means we can also monitor their activity season long just using a trap baited with white or blue light bulbs. And this is their seasonal patterns through last summer with these traps across the region. So that's good. We're learning more about their activity. Number 9, this is just a fact. In this part of the world, we have 2 generations per year. When the bugs come out at this time of the year, they start reproducing and laying eggs. They make it to the adult stage. Then those adults come along and produce another full generation. So this is what it looks like. So here we are. They're in their overwintering sites in our houses and woodlots and places like that. They start emerging and they start laying eggs. And the egg production is starting just about now. We could probably find egg masses this week. Those eggs continue to develop. Then we have nymphs throughout the summer. That first generation completes development by about mid-July, and then we see the second generation completing their development by beginning in about late August to early September. So we do have 2 generations per year in this area, which probably is why we also have a lot of bugs in the late season. But it's good to know because we need to understand their biology. Now, for everybody here that is a homeowner, what we are learning is that physical exclusion, however difficult it may be, can help keep the bugs out. Thing to keep in mind, from September 15th to October 15th, this is when they're going to be moving toward your home. So if you're going to do physical exclusion, that's when you want to do it, because otherwise, where's Doug? Did he come back in? There's Doug. This is Doug's house and the bugs that he removed back in 2011.
It's not my bed.
Okay. Otherwise, we can end up with a lot of bugs. So thinking about, if you want to get some good tips, you can listen and watch Mike Ralph's video, Think Before You Stink. Gives you ideas about physical exclusion with weather stripping, caulking, screening those gable end vents, that kind of thing, which really are the places where bugs are going to go, because bugs have a natural tendency to climb up, and they're going to look for cool, tight, dry locations to overwinter. So if you can exclude them as much as you can, it can help. Now, so that was number 10. Oh, let me show you this. This is one thing, I just want to mention this. I found this associated with a pest control company, and I looked at it and I said, oh, that's nice. And then I started to read some of the information, and I realized some of it was wrong. For example, it says 35 days. A stink bug can develop in 35 days. No, it can't. It takes longer. It takes about 55 days. It says stink bugs come inside for warmth. They do not come inside for warmth. They come inside to find cool, tight, dry locations. They're hibernating, just like bears. They want a cool place to settle down, lower their metabolic rate, and just get through the winter. So sometimes information is still wrong that's put out there. It's just something to keep in mind. So go to your extension service. They'll be able to give you good information. Now, I'll give you a bonus. Number 11. Populations can fluctuate greatly from year to year. This is something that we have learned pretty explicitly over the last couple of years. You know, back in June 2012, this was the headline in some of the national papers. Where have all the stink bugs gone? There were so few at the beginning of last season. And then by late 2012, this was the headline in October on USA Today. Stink bugs plot foul-smelling return, because we knew we had more bugs. And in fact, we have data to show it. This is the peak late season captures of brown marmorated stink bugs. This is indicative of the size of the population that's going into overwintering in 2010, 2011, and 2012. So you can see we had a major fluctuation. This is adults and nymphs. And this was taken at a number of locations in Maryland and West Virginia. So we don't understand why they fluctuate, but they do. And what it means is this year, we're starting out with more stink bugs. The question is how they will do through the season, hopefully poorly, but it's something to keep in mind. So what's next? If you go to our stopbmsb.org website, there is now a video curriculum series that's being put up, and it'll be completed by the end of July, but you can basically watch these little mini documentaries about all of the different projects that are going on with this project and learn more about what we're learning about brown marmorated stink bug. So I encourage you to go to that website. And with that, this is my lab group, and they are all collectively known as stink bug chasers, and they love their jobs, and I appreciate your attention today. Thank you.